long time and doing so much of wonderful work. And of course, they have got a couple of the finest startup founders together to talk about these programs. So we will be starting in a minute. We really appreciate the fact that everyone has got the patience and we joined this webinar. We have our host and moderator, that's going to be Ratna Prabha. And Shilpa, would you like to maybe just have a quick chat about the Catalyst program of SocGen? I think that's something that will be great.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sujata. And thanks everybody for joining us today. We look forward to hosting you on this interesting fireside chat. So to come back to the Catalyst program, this is the 7th edition of the program where we want to partner with the intuitive startups in the Indian ecosystem. We have about 20 challenges that we are planning to co-create solutions for with the startup community. So far we have worked with over 58 startups in the last 6 editions, and we have created about 62 proof of concepts, out of which 19 of them have gone into the pilot phase. So we look forward to seeing more innovative and more engaging startups in this edition as well to work with us. And, I'm sure some of those will also translate to pilots that will go into Society Generale's everlasting 19 pilots that we have. So thanks everyone for joining, and we will again have a catch up on more on the Catalyst program. So you can look us up on F6S platform. So this year we are called the Catalyst Virtual Accelerator 2020, and thanks again.
Thank you so much, Shilpa, for this very crisp overview of the Catalyst program. What we'll also do is, for the support of all the participants and the startups who are here, we can always put the links onto the
chat window,
on the chat window, so that everyone can very quickly, access it. We just want to check. I think Ratna Prabha would have joined. I'm not too sure if she's the Prabha who's there on the as a guest. I'm not too sure.
Just checking.
So that we can make her the co-host and get her on, but we're not too sure. Just rechecking that.
Sure.
Yes, I think that's yeah. Okay, so I think Neil or Tulika, we just need to make Prabha. It's Ratna Prabha. She's going to be the moderator. Thank you so much for joining us, ma'am. And we just will give you the co-host rights right away, and then we can start.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Prabha, we can hear you.
Sorry, it was a struggle. All right. Get started right today. Pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. Let me welcome our esteemed guests today in the meeting and panelists who have taken the time to be part of this discussion. I hope we have our panelists. Sorry for joining me late. India and European business has joined us. Big welcome to Marshall. I also welcome Abhishek Chatterjee, founder and CEO of Society. Welcome to Abhishek. He's a time friend and one of our first cohort. So welcome to Abhishek. Thanks for joining us today. I see that your styling has changed much in the years. I also welcome Sriram Srikanta, COO at Yeti Strategy. Yeti has been working with us since last year. So big welcome to all our panelists, and thanks for taking the time and joining us. A big, I think it's a big welcome that we are waiting to give to our next cohort teams who are right process of around 2 months. Select doing that right now. At SG Global Solutions Center, we aim to help Society Generale businesses harness technology to successfully respond to resilient and human-centered economy, as we now call. Due to COVID-19, most companies are being forced to shift from a regular way of functioning to a digital-first way of working, of course, at unprecedented speed, demanding huge transitions to distributed agile and digital operating models. Today, it is important that companies switch to these models fast, and we are in the same boat as everybody else as an enterprise. As leaders, we are challenged to transform our businesses to deliver sustainable value. It is also an offshore centric GCP way of working with our parent companies. And technology and societal shifts are redefining industry boundaries, as we all know. And I think the business models are emerging every day as we speak in the COVID-19 scenario. As we are focused on co-creating these frameworks and tools that support our business growth, and also create successful transformations for ourselves. Whenever we speak about co-creation, our own catalyst model of collaboration is and that is why we invited two of our alumni members for a discussion along with one of our own leaders. So we will get started right away with the questions that we have. The topic, of course, today uh, is very interesting, and that's called as key to accelerating innovation. And today, as part of that topic, we are very focused on the business growth collaboration between corporates and startups. And that's, I hope, provides us good meat to discuss next 45 minutes. So we can start our first question with Marshmeal. Marshmeal, is there?
Yes, Prabha. Can you hear me?
All right. So, yeah. Yes, I do. So, Marshmeal, what do you really think as a role for startups and enterprise digital transformation strategy?
So I think large organizations like ours, we tend to be very process driven. Our every approach for transformation is quite large, and we pay too much attention on how process driven it can be. What are the different we need to have a roadmap which is fixed. We need to have a governance model which is fixed, and so on. And it helps us in achieving long term business goals. But we, at the same time, in today's market, we want to stay ahead of the game too. So uh, we now recognize the need to have a startup mentality. We believe that yes, we need the speed and the agility, and the scale. I mean, the kind of the kind of knowledge a startup organization tends to have about the market. So the scale and the resources that startups possess, I think today the symbiotic relationship between a startup and an organization, a large organization, tends to give a lot of positive results. And so there's a research, some of the research papers, and one which kind of stood out for me was about from Gartner, which said that around 50% of corporations will be leveraging startup technologies and techniques by next year. So I think in today's world, we definitely tend to benefit from startups as much as they benefit from us.
I would like to pose the same question to you, Abhishek. What do you, from a startup angle, what do you think are the roles startups play in digital transformation?
Thank you, Prava. Thank you for inviting me to the fireside chat. It's always a pleasure to meet you and Marshnil. I think we were one of the first cohort companies, almost like 2016 or 17 back then, right? And we have built such a great relationship with Chen, and it's always good to have you guys as mentors and supporters in our journey. So it's awesomely glad to be part of this program. To answer your question, one of the things that we are noticing over the last couple of years is that, especially in banks, large transformation projects are not very popular with enterprises, right? Gone are the days where people can take 5-7 years of large transformation changes. That's not going to happen. And also with the post-COVID situation, things are changing. So what large enterprises are essentially looking for, and through our experience in the last couple of years as we have grown from Singapore and US and multiple areas, is that most of the large banks or enterprises are looking for point solutions where the ROI can be established in possibly 1, 2, or max 3 years. The solution should offer some sort of a dedicated offering which solves a specific pain point, and it can be easily integrated into the ecosystem, and the ROI can be established. That's sort of a solution or an ecosystem which large enterprises are looking for. And I think this is where startups fit very well. Startups are nimble, agile. We offer something for a specific problem statement, and we can offer that solution very quickly and still establish that ROI that enterprises are looking for. And that's where I believe the partnership plays a very important role, where to make digital transformation projects successful, it's important that enterprises onboard specific startups with specific solutions with defined benchmarks and ROI, where the banks can really see the benefit coming in without large changes, as well as providing the ROI that they're looking for successful transformation projects to happen. That's where I believe a good sort of handshake happens between startups and enterprises.
Thank you, Abhishek. Sriram, what is your opinion?
Hey, thanks, Prabha. Just to build on what Abhishek says, yes, he had some good points, but I just would like to add a few more things. Big corporates are inherently, built to maintain a status quo. Their entire org structure is built to make sure that you don't really rock the apple cart too much. And funding for new novel ideas is difficult to come by because it's unproven and it might take too much. Whereas startups don't have those problems. They have other problems. They have no money, they have no funding, they have very little access to people, capital, and all of that. But what they have is maybe an idea, a good idea, and a determination to make that idea work. And the way I think the ecosystem works between startups and large enterprises is that startups pursue an idea, take it to a stage where the costs, benefits, all of those are determinable, giving the enterprise an opportunity to evaluate and accept those ideas which will work within its ecosystem. Startups have this radical element which will go and discover a lot of different things, new things. And what's interesting to see is that in the last few years, the large enterprises like yourselves have started to recognize that there are fantastic ideas which are out there which may not be completely production ready, but they offer a great, or they could be or could not be production ready, but platforms like Catalyst help take them to a situation where they become viable solutions and can quickly be rolled out to a much greater benefit in the enterprise, definitely.
Thanks, Srirang. It was a great answer. Moving on to the next question that we all really think of often, first of all, as an innovation department as well, we do wonder about the opinions of various enterprises as well as ourselves. How can innovation play its part in economic recovery and stabilization of business growth? So we'll start with you, Srirang. What do you think? Innovation is not something that startups have not seen. I mean, they start with innovation with every product and every strategy that you have. So, how does it play its part in economic recovery and stabilization, both for enterprise and startups?
Shriram, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, despite 3 months of practice, you still do this. So. Yeah, as I said, that is a tough one because the situation that we are in is very, very unique. But like always, one thing that defines a startup is to optimize and channel resources to where you will get the best benefit. And so innovation is all about, as I think we learned it way back when we were in school sometime. necessity is the mother of innovation, and today we have a great necessity. I think there are a lot of people who are trying to do different things, which you can see with the number of COVID tests, the vaccines that are coming out, the initiatives taken by the government in terms of housing, employment. I saw an ad recently where the government is stepping into running a job portal. So these are different ways of innovating. I don't think the entire spectrum of what all could be tried and would be tried has completed, but I am sure startups would form to service people in these difficult times, and you would start. It would start, I think, in the medical field, where we look at um, vaccines and treatments and so on. But we should quickly see it translate into how we interact with customers. If you talk about banking, there is a lot of interaction. There's a lot of paper-based interaction that we still do. A lot has changed on the consumer side. A lot still remains on the corporate side. But these are things where an entire ecosystem has to evolve. It is not something that is in the hands of a single entity, but you have the entire ecosystem which has to evolve. And I believe some of that would happen over the next few years as we progress through this.
Thank you. Abhishek, what do you think is the role of innovation in economic recovery and business growth stabilization?
Sure. I'll give you an example of, Singapore ecosystem and how they have been doing. And I'll bring the analogy to the Indian ecosystem, right? India as a whole is a young country per se, right? There are a lot of people who are young in the sense in between the age of 22 to 32, whatever that range be. And these are the people, who kind of drive our economy forward. Specifically in the context of the Singapore economy, the government played a very important role to keep on supporting the startup ecosystem, because they are the ones who can employ or who can make these sort of people part of their growth story, be it through grants, be it through vocational trainings, be it through teaching them skills which they might not have but then is applicable in the current scenario. So I strongly believe that startups, if they are enabled to kind of make sure they have the enough cash flow, they have the enough capacity to kind of employ, involve uh, the next generation of leaders as well as the people, right, into their ecosystem, that will definitely help in a faster economic recovery that we are going. So if there are ways that that can be enabled, specifically what we saw in Singapore was that specific startups in specific industries, medical, agriculture, like multiple areas, certain grants, certain loans, certain trainings are being provided, which allows the startup, even though they don't have external VC funding or others, they can still go out and employ these people to make sure that one, the startup itself is kind of growing, and number two, it provides the necessary economic recovery manpower through the manpower development process that's happening. So I think having a large number of startups, enabling them to continue their role in delivering value to the ecosystem will actually allow, number one, economic recovery in terms of stabilization and job, which will eventually lead to a better economic outcome. So that's how I believe, enabling startups, not just money, but education, training, so that the overall, the population of a country can be absorbed in that ecosystem, will actually make a huge difference, not just short term, but also in a mid to long term basis.
Thanks, Abhishek. Now that we are getting into the challenges faced by startups, let's discuss about it a little bit more. I'm sure most of these challenges were not anticipated, but now that it is already there, what are the challenges really faced by fintechs that a country and enterprises can really help them with? But I'm just fully focused on the during and post-COVID scenario when I'm asking this question.
Do you want me to
Abhishek,
start?
can you elaborate? Yeah, can you elaborate a few more challenges that
Yeah,
are faced by you and Srirang? I think both of you I think we'd really like to hear from you on the challenges so that we can really incorporate, whatever solution we can give for them in our program.
Right. So I think one of the biggest challenges in the startup ecosystem is that essentially, if you're a B2B, right, deals would get pushed or delayed, which eventually will affect the growth outlook and how you're managing your cash flow and thereafter. So essentially, we are definitely seeing challenges in deals getting pushed or delayed. That's one. Second thing that we are also seeing is that even though deals are getting pushed or delayed in certain areas, specifically in the areas around digital transformation, specifically on contactless customer onboarding, rise in payment methods, are also kind of evolving. So that what we believe is a great area, because this is creating new opportunities. On one side, deals are getting pushed and delayed, but on the other side, new opportunities are being created. Specifically, at least in our line of business, what we're seeing is there's a huge demand in some sort of a customer onboarding, rise in payments, right? The other challenge that we are also seeing is, as the banks tend to move towards work from anywhere kind of a situation, the security requirement is also changing, right? Where startups who had a certain mode of deployment might not be able to deploy the solution that they think would be adequate, which again will essentially cause delays as well as pushing of deals. Which essentially also leads to another problem that we are also seeing, is that banks are very wary of choosing projects which has large integration points, or the time it takes to kind of create the data into the format which the startups or the products can use is also getting very small, right? Banks don't have that appetite. So overall, if you ask me, right, the broad set of challenges that we as enterprise startups face is, it starts with deal getting pushed or delayed. If we start looking at it, we will see that the problem lies in multiple areas. One is the priorities for banks or financial institutions are changing, because the way the underlying consumers are behaving are changing. That's one. Number two, how they're doing their business is changing. Work from anywhere, the data security requirements are changing. And the third is the appetite for long integration or interface projects is very low. So when you have all these sort of problems, right, or when you have, you might say, all these such as opportunities, startups on one side has delayed deal problems, but on the side we also need to make sure we are continuously able to build those features to support that need, which is a very interesting problem in my mind, because on one side you have delayed revenue, on the other side you have new products or innovation to bring in to cater to that new requirement. So being able to be very agile, being able to make sure that you are nimble, your software processes are quickly able to change and then quickly able to cater to those needs is the need of the hour. And that is what we believe is key requirement, is how can current startups, knowing the challenges that they have, understand those and create mechanisms to kind of get out of that situation, primarily in the sales innovation space, and second is on the client onboarding innovation space. I think these two are two big areas that startup needs to focus on, because what we have learned in the journey is that product market fit for B2B software company is not any constant pole, it's a journey. So being able to accept that and then continuously adopt to that, knowing the current situation, is key. But that's where I believe the current challenges are. It's the challenge which deals would get pushed. It's a challenge that the product requirement would get pushed. And we as startups need to be innovative to handle those changes and present a very convincing solution to our clients.
Thank you, Abhishek. Sriram, what
Yeah,
according to you are the challenges faced by fintechs and startups that enterprise should be
I,
wary of?
yeah, I think what Abhishek made a mention was fairly accurate. I think the biggest challenge we startups face today is, do we how do we stay afloat and how do we remain relevant? Um, staying afloat is despite the fact that you've had a great year past year. Uh, you've ramped up on the assumption that you're going to grow a little more, and suddenly COVID hits you, and you have all of these people on rolls, plans which you have promised others, and the revenue is not coming in because customers are pushing buying decisions right now. So it is essentially a cash flow problem. It is, and what we would see is a lot of young entrepreneurs struggle now to get by, just because, not that because they have a bad business or they have a wrong idea or the startup was not meant to continue. It's just that they've run out of cash and they don't see anything happening in the short term. Um, and as Abhishek said, the whole thing about how do you remain relevant? Is your service, is your delivery model, is your engagement model, customer engagement model, going to survive the test of not being able to travel on site, not being able to meet customers face to face? That is a big problem that all of us have had to face. Some of the other things which I think, if you look at from the Indian ecosystem versus the international ecosystem, we have seen in the Indian ecosystem, all of us know that the public sector banks play a huge role in any company's survival or growth in the country. What we have seen is a massive reduction in the number of buyers in the market because of the consolidation. How does a startup engage with these large organizations who are inherently not very comfortable working with smaller companies, unlike a SocGen, which has this whole innovation program, which is fantastically run? How does a company in India wanting to serve the Indian market remain relevant? How does it engage with the larger banks in the country? That's one challenge. I think the flip side to it is the new regulations which RBI is bringing about, or the government is thinking about, of bringing the cooperative segments under the RBI's rule, which hopefully will lead to more opportunities for people like us who are specifically looking at the financial services sector. Internationally, because we cater to customers both in India and outside, finding face time, finding customer attention is something that we all are struggling with right now. Things which you could sit across the table, express and discuss and solve are definitely taking a lot longer for us. So in my view, these are some of the things. Yeah, Prabha.
I would like to continue asking a question that you both touched upon, which is, you have your core products that I'd like to give you an opportunity to speak about, that is constantly also changing and adapting to your client needs in the current times. So the question is, how are you adapting your products to the changing times and current needs? And also, I'd like to understand, as a startup, I know that you're not a startup anymore. You've been around for at least 5 to 6 years, I'm aware of, or more. How has this, what kind of a response has the crisis really induced for your company? So two questions. One is how your products getting adapted, and what kind of a response as a company are you providing the changing times?
You want me to start, or Shriram, you want to start?
No, go ahead.
Right. So, Prabha, just to understand the question, right? So the first question is that, you're asking, how is
on the product, yeah.
On the
so
product.
You have your core products, yeah. How your products, I'm sure they're good even in these times, but are you having to adapt them to your very specific client needs? Number one, and as a company, how are you really responding yourselves to this crisis? Yeah.
Got it. So I think from a product point of view, I would say that, as I just extending what I said before, right, for a pure B2B play, right, we never used to focus on or too much on effort on consumerization of our product, which basically means that sassifying our product. B2B software, it solves a problem. These are solutions that you deploy, and then there's integration effort that kind of injects the solution into the bank's environment. But I think with COVID coming in, it is being very clear that gone are the days of large ETL integration projects, right? You have to kind of agree to the point that data would be in a shape which it is, but can you build enough connectors? Can you build API layers to satisfy your product onboarding as much as possible? So one of the key requirements that we are seeing and a product is evolving is being or bringing that ability to easily integrate the product, or rather kind of sassifying the product so that the customers itself can onboard the product, do that seamlessly without large interaction happening to take place. So that's, I think, one key area that we had to change a lot of our product just to make it more consumerized. That's one. Number two, where we had to actually evolve and adapt is especially the area on how we are offering our package as a whole. So what do you mean by that? So essentially what used to happen is that a lot of our products are available on various cloud solutions. You can download it. It's a marketplace. What we are also seeing is that even though banks are moving towards a more cloud adoption, but then due to the GDPR laws and a lot of issues around European and the US situation, they're moving into some sort of a private cloud environment. People are working from anywhere. So banks are generally little privacy concerned than what they were before. So essentially, being able to provide a software which can learn holistically from multiple banks is not really happening, at least in our product point of view. So we kind of introduced or brought in a lot of innovation around federated learning, where the learnings can happen on multiple banks, but then we are seamlessly able to kind of extract out those learnings where there's no customer data or whatever that is there from their private cloud information, but still kind of share those learnings across the board without any privacy sort of or in a privacy enabled way. So that's the two big areas that we saw a lot of changes happening. One is sassifying the product, onboarding is as easy, and number two, kind of improving the security aspect of the product, the data sharing aspect. Because of the current situation, banks are very wary. So enabling a more distributed federated approach where the learning can happen more seamlessly than actually sharing data are the two big areas that we saw that our clients change, and we had to adopt to keep on supporting that flow. The third one, which is very specific to us, is there was a big focus on machine learning explainability. We always had explainability framework, but in a pre-COVID version, there were a lot of people in the model validation, in the analytics team to look at data. But now, because people are working from home, there are so much of work in that situation, and so much of infrastructure required. Banks are making decision based on machine learning models, and then hence there's a huge requirement that the explainability framework is as tight as possible. So these are the three specific areas we saw a lot of need, and our product kind of evolved in a way. And just summarizing it before I hand it to Shrikant, is that number one, sassifying so that onboarding is easy. Number two, sharing of information and data so that it's in a more decentralized way. And third, if you are a machine learning specific explainability framework, which allows banks to get comfort in using the tool that you would like to use. Shrikant, over to you.
Thanks.
Very nicely put. Thank you, Abhishek. Over to you, Shriram. Yeah.
Yeah. So what we are seeing, the biggest difference is some of it is in the product, some of it is how we engage with customers. What earlier as an enterprise solution, we could assume that we would spend time within the client's premises or have people who could spend time in the client's premises to help with infrastructure and so on. As we've learned in the last 3 months, it's not always guaranteed that there would be people at all times or at relevant times within a client's premises. And so your entire approach to deployment and customer service has changed to assume zero footprint, very little or no footprint. You're investing a lot more in communication tools, so that because a large part of the product deployment, product onboarding in a customer premises is about making them comfortable. And when the face-to-face communication, direct communication doesn't happen, it takes that much longer. Apprehension is so much more. So there's a huge amount of investment that we are doing in order to build communication platforms or subscribe to communication platforms to make the whole process. Yes, the entire journey towards SaaS-based deployment, SaaS-based platforms has been accelerated for us, which, while we thought that maybe enterprise would be available for us as an option for a couple of more years, we've had to rejig everything and fast track our SaaS-based product development and deployment. Just because we recognize that within India and outside India, infrastructure teams, customer teams are not available. People are not interested in working and putting together large pieces of infrastructure for any enterprise platform unless very, very core and central. Bandwidth availability of people is very low.
Thank you. Yeah.
Prava, I just wanted to add one more point here, which I thought might be interesting for others, young startups, is that I think just to add on to Srirang, what he said is that the distribution channel has also evolved as a whole for enterprise startups. What we are constantly seeing is that lot of companies, right, wants to work with vendors who are already existing, vendors for the bank itself. They don't want to go through like a large onboarding process, which generally we have to go through for banking systems, right? So that has been one of the key, I think, difficult situations onboarding banks, because they don't want to create a new vendor during this COVID situation or post COVID. So one of the innovation that startups can do, and we saw a lot of success, is that creating a channel partner distribution process, where the channel partners, be it in a consulting companies or system integrators or OEMs, right, might have already existing relationships which can be packaged as part of your product, which can enable faster deployment process that in a startup face. So that is one area that we have invested quite a bit, and we are seeing quite a bit of success, and especially in the B2B space, and something that early stage companies should definitely think through. Of course, it is difficult, because if you have not sold, what would the channel partner sell for you? But being able to create a right sort of a playbook would be key for growth for any B2B companies, just as a suggestion.
It's a great suggestion, Abhishek. I'm sure it will be very helpful to the startup founders who listen. So thank you so much. Marshmail, a question to you. So as we are going through our own digital transformation at Society Generale, in general, the banking industry, as we follow the various digital transformations, question to you is, what are the key success factors measurable in a digital transformation scenario in every banking?
So I think I would attribute like 4 or 5 things that we need to be really wary about when we talk about digital transformation in banking industry. One is to put the customer at the core. Now, today's customers are quite they're quite aware. They're very demanding, and they want really good customer experience. So for everything and anything that we build, and every transformation, digital transformation we want to bring to our industry, we need to understand and really analyze what the customer is looking for. I mean, that whole mindset change from what's good for the bank to what is the customer really need, what does the customer really need, becomes a primary focus. Secondly, I think in the banking industry, we have a lot of data. I mean, we definitely need to leverage the power of data that we have, and the kind of data that we collect over a period of time through different transactions and so on. I think it is high time that we start using and leveraging data for analytics purposes, for insights, to understand and monitor, like what is it the customer, how's the customer thinking patterns, how can we improve, how do we create the most relevant products that match the customer needs primarily. And it also gives us market insight as to what are our peers doing, what are the other competitors doing. So to be relevant, I think we definitely need to leverage the data that we have. Another point I believe is, while we are very ambitious and we aspire to bring in emerging technology and so on, it is time where we figure out ways to modernize our legacy systems. So we need to keep pace with the digital transformation that is happening around. Cloud implementations. How do we look at big data? How do we probably look at microservice architecture? How do we leverage on APIs, DevOps, and all of this is basically what our existing systems are. We do need to change that and transform that internally, so that it's more the integration with the new emerging technology that we are bringing in is much more seamless, and the turnaround time, the time to market, becomes much shorter. And I would say the other thing is, while our vision has to be long term, we need to know where we want to reach. Our outcomes can be short term, as in minimum viable offerings. We should be able to test and learn. We don't have to go into a full-fledged implementation before we realize that, okay, something might not be working. So the sooner that agile practice of build something, run it, test it, make a change if required, is something that we need to definitely leverage on. And finally, I think our workforce, there's this whole automation anxiety happens when people are ignorant about what digital transformation will do to their lives. So I think as workforce, and to all the employees, our digital leaders, everyone needs to skill up to understand that what is coming, because that is inevitable. The digital transformation will happen. So the best is to have that cultural mindset change, and as well as be aware of the technologies that are there. I think that's from my end.
Sure, Marshall, continuing on that, you have teams that are doing the digital transformation within the organization. You have employees in your teams who are doing it. What is your view on startups supporting digital transformations?
I
From
think
an external viewpoint, yeah.
The startup ecosystem is really rich. I mean, a few years back, I think we were in that state where we had the will to transform. We wanted to bring in the best technology. We wanted to make this change, and we have really grown massively with the startup ecosystem. We brought in new technologies. We brought in the expertise. The whole collaborative learning. I mean, it was really symbiotic, even for the startups as well as for us, to learn what's happening in the market. And this ecosystem definitely helps us, experiment, to try out things which we are not even aware of, or probably we do know about it, but at the same time, it's been tried and tested, and probably somewhere else, and we want to leverage that. So instead of having every experience as our own, we are harnessing someone else's experience. How they have built a product, what is the the market survey that they have done. So I think for us, the startup ecosystem is integral. It really massively improves our learning capacity, as well as I think it benefits the startups too. And yeah, I think any day we would be very, very, very happy to be collaborating with the different startups around.
So today we are engaging with startups in a cohort-based model, which is our standard model, and we're trying to introduce newer models. What is your opinion on other models that can really help us in these times to engage with startups better?
I think now after 7 editions, different within the organization, people have started realizing how well how well we've worked with the startups and how much benefit both the organizations get when we have a relationship around a different business case or so. So now the way we are also trying to work around is that instead of having a fixed accelerator program, we do have an open the whole culture of open innovation, where if there is a particular use case, if there's a business case, a person, a particular business line brings forward, we can directly reach out to the startups, to the startup ecosystem, find the best few startups who have expertise in that particular area, and start working with them directly. So we don't have to primarily wait for a very fixed program like the accelerators that we had. And I think so this whole collaboration effort with the startup is now also we can directly introduce the startups to the business units here, and explore what kind of synergies are possible. So it can be an open exploration and discovery kind of framework too.
Which gets me to the next question, Abhishek and Srirang. As banks, we primarily, apart from looking for startups to innovate along with us and co-create solutions along with us, we're also trying to secure our sensitive data. And what are the best? So it's important for us while we consider various engagement models with startups to understand what are the best practices in the industry for data protection typically followed, so that we can learn from them, that you both are coming across.
Shreyang, you want to start, or do you want me to quickly?
You can start, Abhishek.
Okay, sure. So I think number one, what we are seeing is that there are two things, right? One is there's a lot of use cases on the products being deployed on a cloud native solution, and it could be public cloud or private cloud. In sort of deployments in a cloud native solution, one of the questions that comes into is how are we managing sensitive customer data? So one of the key things that we are seeing is that is an increased need for data encryption technologies, what we call as homomorphic data encryption, where even though the data is encrypted at the client side and the data gets uploaded into the cloud native environment, still the data is usable for various sort of machine learning or analytics processes. So having a very clear data encryption, data protection kind of a process and strategy is very key, because a lot of the times when there is no clear direction in how the data encryption process will work, is not defined, that's when we see a lot of discussions getting into of how best to kind of protect the data. So I would say is that if banks, when onboarding any sort of a startup process, defining the standard data encryption process of what data is sensitive, what is not, and what sort of tools can be built in to kind of protect the data, and defining that those key matrices is essential for success of any project, at least in this sort of environment where everything would be virtual. So the best practices in our mind, working with a few of the global financial institutions, is having a very clear data encryption, data sharing policy already defined, and you kind of aligning with that strategy. So that's one. The second approach that we are also seeing is that because of this sort of a COVID situation, if you require sensitive data, it just takes too much time to get the approvals that is required. Even though you kind of encrypt the data, but still there is a lot of time required to get those processes. So having some sort of a way where the learning can be as much distributed and decentralized as possible, but you still get the benefit without getting into a more customer specific behavior rather than moving to a more aggregated sort of a behavior that can still provide similar sort of outcome is another way that we are seeing a lot of data protection strategies are being in place. So aggregation, so that there is no singling out of any customer, is the way. So two things in our mind that working with global banks in our experience works best is a very clear data encryption policy of how the data will be shared and what sort of encryption will be used and what is the outcome of the analytics that will be running. And number two, not just looking at every customer level, but more at an aggregate level, but still be able to get the outcome that you require, are the two broad sort of strategies that we are seeing broadly adopted by the banking ecosystem.
Excellent. It's good learning for us as well.
Thanks.
Srirang, do you see any best practices that we could learn from?
Unfortunately, for the past 5 years, from this question perspective, thankfully, we have not had to deal with very customer specific, customer sensitive data. Since we work off, our startup is in the testing quality assurance space. So we're not really dealing with customer specific data. But having spent 20, 25 years in the banking industry, banking software, some of the things I would echo what Abhishek says: transparency and complete knowledge of what you're doing with data, specifically if it is customer data, upfront when you get into an engagement with a financial institution is very important. Knowing what you're going to do, where you're going to store, how you're going to store, and what recourse people have. GDPR is a real requirement nowadays. The need not to be followed, need not to be remembered is something which we all have to build into platforms, marketing strategies, all of these. So transparency is one thing. And the second thing I think is recognizing that no two financial institutions have the same policy or the same, each CISO is going to employ or have his own view of what is sacred and what can be let go. So when you walk into a large an interaction with any small or large financial institution, recognizing that there would be tweaks, there would be changes that you have to deploy in your solution, in your access processes, in your internal processes. Despite having started, one of the things you have to do very start of your if you're building software, you have to start looking at it from a security angle very early on, which thankfully we did. But despite which we had a lot of learnings when we started wanting to deploy with SocGen that actually helped us. So as startup founders over here, anyone who is planning to apply, I would just advise that you come in with an open mind and believe that this is going to help you in the overall journey.
Thank you. That was my last question as to what your suggestions are to the other entrepreneurs who are applying to our program. And thanks for sharing your experience with the Catalyst, Srirang. Abhishek, what was your experience with our Catalyst program and your suggestions to the applying entrepreneurs?
Okay, so I'm just thinking through, right? So it was, as you said, right? We were one of the first 8 startups selected in, your Catalyst Accelerator program. It was almost 2016, 17.
First
right?
edition, yeah.
The first edition one, right? I think a couple of things that for me was a very clear differentiator is that during that time, there were a lot of accelerator programs, but none of them was matched with a key sponsor or a specific problem statement. Now, this is very important. It is generally underestimated, but you will see that when you get into an corporate accelerator and you don't have a key sponsor or a key problem statement, after the program ends, it gets very difficult to kind of scale that specific problem into a pilot and to a production, right? So I think in specifically in the case of SocGen Catalyst, right, we were very lucky to be kind of aligned with 2 key sponsors, and I remember one was in the KYC space and one was in the reconciliation space. And in that process, what we saw was, number one, we were able to really understand the consumer journey which is the buyer and the user are different, and we kind of realized that very quickly. And the second thing is that when we were kind of moving to a pilot stage, we had to actually work through the business problem, the business case, the ROI, which for us was a completely new learning, right? So from a early stage company in 2016, right, where I think the clear differentiator was just that we were matched with a problem statement, but on the hindsight, I think it was a really great program. The highlights were being able to not only get matched with the a problem statement, but a key sponsor who kind of helped us understanding the consumer journey, number one, and also finally also helped us in building the business case. That I think was is a very key learning which kind of helped or evolved us as a product as we started selling to others as well. So for us, it was a really I would say an inflection point of our of how we kind of grew the startup from there.
Thank you. That those were excellent viewpoints shared by Abhishek, Srirang, and Narshneel. So thank you very much. We've run out of time. We have a few more questions that are posted, and we will answer back to the startup founders who asked these questions. So thank you very much for your time, and keep applying to our program. Looking forward for new startup partners to work with and learn from all of you. Thank you. Signing off.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Bye.
Abhishek, and thanks, Srirang, and thanks, Prabha and Marshall, for driving this interesting fireside chat for us.
Thank you. Bye.